The first 2 episodes of Star Wars Ahsoka are now out, and just as the early social media reactions indicated, it is for all intents and purposes Season 5 of the animated Rebels, which further builds on the animated Clone Wars. In other words, if you, like me, are a fan of The Mandalorian and never gave those animated series Dave Filoni made for children the time of day, then you haven't done your homework for Ahsoka, and chances are you'll be left confused. I think a rather panicked Disney only now realized that might result in some rather mixed word of mouth, because seemingly on order, the industry trade, The Hollywood Reporter, just released a list of 15 episodes from previous animated Star Wars series you need to have seen before episode 1 of Ahsoka. In this editorial, I will begin with why this is a most unusual thing for an industry trade to do, what might have happened behind the scenes at Disney and Lucasfilm to instigate it, and on that note, how important it is that Ahsoka succeed where the other recent Star Wars series have failed. On August 21st, on the eve of the Ahsoka premiere, The Hollywood Reporter published the story Ahsoka, 15 key episodes from previous Star Wars series to watch before the Disney Plus premiere. First of all, that's something you'd expect from an industry-adjacent movie blog that wants their access, like Collider or CBR or some Star Wars site or something, but not an actual industry outlet like The Hollywood Reporter. Granted, this is from their Heat Vision series, which is more inclined towards what happens on screen rather than behind it, but still, this article is way outside their usual wheelhouse. It reads, "If you've seen only the Star Wars live-action movies and none of the TV series, you may not know who Ahsoka Tano is." Right there, the purpose behind this article, which I submit Disney paid to have published as a tacit influencer piece, is revealed. Because it's true, you can be the biggest Star Wars fan in the world, you can know every line in every movie forwards and backwards, but if you've never seen those series for children with that off-putting, dreadful animation, you're about to be as confused by Ahsoka as those who went into Marvel's Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness without having seen WandaVision first. Turns out that additional stuff you thought was an optional extra actually was homework, and it will be on the test. The article continues. The former Jedi was Anakin Skywalker's Padawan during the Clone Wars, set after the events of Episode 2 and before Episode 3. She was introduced in the 2008 Clone Wars feature film, which kicked off the 133-episode animated series. 133 episodes? And that's not even counting, 4 seasons of Rebels? If they expect me to watch that, they're out of their minds. But moving on with the article, she also has appeared in Disney Plus's Tales of the Jedi and Star Wars Rebels, and delighted fans with the live-action debut in the 2nd season of The Mandalorian. And that latter bit is all good and well. I have no issues with her inclusion in the Mandoverse, but I do feel that the animated children's series in which she originated should be treated as a child-friendly version of events that happened in canon. They just haven't gotten around to filming the actual canon events yet. At the time of her inclusion in The Mandalorian, Jon Favreau was firmly in charge of that series, and him being the one relaying those events in live action with some help from Dave Filoni was a very exciting prospect, which is why so many were so delighted to see her in Favreau's The Mandalorian. But Favreau was just a bit too successful with The Mandalorian for Kathleen Kennedy's liking. Kathleen Kennedy likes her girl bosses, except for the ones who can kick ass in real life and have the conviction of their own opinions, like Gina Carano. And Gina Carano just so happened to be one of the few load-bearing pillars in the universe Favreau had mapped out. As we have covered before, when Kennedy fired Carano, that led to the cancellation of not just one, but 2 of Favreau's planned series. First, Rangers of the New Republic, and then a Cara Dune series, which would have been spun off from it. This is why so many episodes of The Book of Boba Fett had to be wasted on The Mandalorian, since the storylines intended for Rangers of the New Republic had to be crammed in there instead, while Season 3 of The Mandalorian was also heavily compromised. Since then, Favreau appears to have stepped more and more into the background, while Kennedy's faithful acolyte, the aforementioned Dave Filoni, has by all accounts taken over the more active role in the Mandoverse, spearheading not just Ahsoka, but the movie that will conclude that whole storyline. I mean, Kennedy left little doubt who she considers to be the more important of the two.
I think people are really excited for Dave Filoni.
And we sat down and talked with Dave about it. You know what we're seeing, and Dave talked a lot about this. Obviously, John and Dave, I wouldn't do it without Dave.
Yeah.
I mean, Dave created so much of what was in Clone Wars and Rebels, and that's really building toward what Dave's doing in the feature space. Certainly looking at what Dave's been doing with Ahsoka, he's, what's great about Jim is he's a writer-director, much like Dave is. So that Dave is very influenced by Kurosawa and Japanese films. Dave's.
Here it should be noted though, that since then, Indiana Jones tanked, meaning Kennedy had ruined the final piece of the Lucasfilm pie, so by all accounts, she is now in the process of leaving the building. If so, there is at least a theoretical chance Favreau could return to right the ship again, but he had little to no involvement on Ahsoka, and without him there to rein showrunner Dave Filoni in, it does look as though Filoni assumed the entire audience would be familiar with all of his earlier animated series for children, because he seems to have continued where they left off. Concluding the Hollywood Reporter article, below find a list of key episodes to watch to get to know the character, as curated by the Hollywood Reporter digital managing editor and her 14-year-old son. All episodes can be found on Disney Plus through a subscription, or for rent/download on various other streaming services. This list is by no means comprehensive. Yes, we realize there are other great episodes we could have included, but we know newcomers have so little time to catch up. But it does give some insight into the character and her backstory. And then they list the 15 episodes, a great service which I'm sure Disney and Lucasfilm will be very grateful for. I mean, a helping hand like that from an actual industry trade would normally be quite expensive, but here we are led to believe the digital managing editor and her son did it for free out of the goodness of their hearts. All sarcasm aside, I think Disney just may have had some input here, because they need this to be a hit. We now know that what Favreau was doing all along was setting up the fan-favorite heir to the Empire storyline from the Timothy Zahn books. By the way, check out our interview with him. But back to the topic at hand, even if Dave Filoni is the one seeing it through right now, that remains their best chance of bringing Star Wars back from the brink. But if the live-action introduction to Thrawn falls flat because everyone not familiar with Filoni's earlier animated series can't keep up, that's a big frickin' problem. And just to put a scale on that problem, this article lists 15 episodes you should have seen before watching Ahsoka, and that's a bare minimum, and one of them is feature length. In terms of running time, it'll likely take significantly longer to watch them than it will take to watch the entire season of the live-action Ahsoka. That tells me that Filoni dropped the ball, because this article seems like a Hail Mary, a desperate attempt to cue the built-in Mandalorian audience on what they need to know going in. I am hoping for the best here, and that we'll all be pleasantly surprised by the season as a whole. But knowing that these ugly-ass animated series are required watching for it does diminish my excitement. But that is me. What about you? Let me know if you're a fan of the animated series or not, and how excited you are for Ahsoka in the comments.